Oh man, I forgot my glasses. Shit. That's a babbler, I believe. Let's get to the river. On this fucking dog. Yeah. There's a long-tailed glossy starling right there. There he is. My son and I call the long-tailed glossy starling the LTGS. Probably put this down because I'm approaching a couple soldiers. Oh shit. It's funny, when I first started recording this video, when I walked out of our hotel this morning, I didn't have my glasses on and I didn't notice right away. But after a while, I started to realize that there was a certain fuzziness to the world. And this kind of fuzziness is something that you can sometimes experience with depersonalization and derealization. A subject I'm going to talk about right now that was brought up in the comments of another video. Like akathisia, oftentimes when we talk about it, we don't have the words to express it. It's not as it's not as much physical torture as akathisia, but it is very terrifying. And when I described it the other day, I said it might sound kind of trippy, like it sounds like a cool, kind of interesting dissociative experience where you get separated from your mind or your mind and your body. It is not. It is fucking terrifying. And people experience it in different ways. Some people experience it where they feel like they're outside of their body, looking at their body as if it's like a third-person view from above. There's people that feel like they're going through life in kind of like a dreamlike state. You know, these frogs are cool and all, but I think it's just, you're probably not going to hear what I'm saying. Alright, I think there are less frogs over on this side. My experience with depersonalization and derealization was this. I only once or twice had an experience where I was seeing my body from outside. The majority of the time, the experience, and I also didn't really have this experience of going through life in this, where it's like kind of this dreamlike or unreal, you know, derealization, a dreamlike quality to it. I didn't really experience that. I did have a couple times where I felt like I was seeing myself from outside my body, but most often I felt like I was actually detached from my mind and, importantly, my identity. And this is a very terrifying feeling. Oh, you gotta be fucking... The feeling of being detached from your brain, the way I kind of describe it is that, imagine that there's like an astronaut on the space station and he has to go outside to do like a spacewalk and he's tethered to the thing, but then something happens and the tether breaks and he becomes disconnected, and then he's just floating in space, just in the abyss. And that feeling, that's basically, you know, my brain and my mind, that's like the disconnect. And it's like my mind and identity are suddenly free floating. My mind and my identity are suddenly free floating apart from each other, and they're no longer tethered. They're no longer connected. And you get into this really panicked mode where you start suddenly scrambling. It's like your brain is firing off every neuron it has to try to figure out where the fuck your identity has gone. You know, you temporarily lose this sense of who you are. And it's like you're scrambling to like grab onto something. And it's like it's like you're grabbing for something and it's disappearing the same time you reach for it. And it kind of builds on itself, it spirals, and it's like, it is anxiety and panic and all this stuff. You know, your brain is in an absolute frenzy. There was someone in the comments who wrote that in some DPDR episodes for them, they were experiencing something as if there was like a shield around their brain. That analogy also makes sense to me. That analogy also makes sense to me. It somehow becomes like there's this, yeah, disassociation is the word, and it's used a lot. But again, when you talk about these things, it can sound like an experience that's, yeah, might be interesting, or, you know, this is something that, in any case, not terrifying. But we weren't made to feel this way. And so when it happens, it's a malfunction. Our brain is short-circuiting. And our brain is not equipped really to deal with circumstances. And it's like throwing the kitchen sink at trying to figure it out and get yourself back to the place where you do feel like you are tethered to your identity, that your brain and your mind are connected, and your body as well. Your physical being and your conscious self, it's like they've been torn apart, and there's nothing more distressing for your brain than that. I remember a lot of times it would happen. Sometimes I'd be laying in bed, trying to go to bed, and you know, you can have kind of these episodes of circular thinking and rumination and catastrophizing where you start having a thought and it kind of builds and builds and builds and it gets worse, and you're imagining things and the worst case scenarios and all these things. Then you can lead yourself into certainly anxiety, but sometimes a full-on panic attack. But sometimes I would go into this DPDR realm, and it was worse for me than a panic attack, because you have all of those, that fight or flight reflex going wild, but at the same time you don't have anything to cling to. You don't have you know, you feel like you've just gone, like you've vanished, but you knew you were there. You know, you're floating somewhere. You knew you were there. You know you are somewhere. You think you are. You hope you're somewhere. And when I say you, I'm talking about your conscious self, your identity. I mean, this sounds all very abstract, but if you actually experience it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, like I said, you're kind of, it's this panicked scramble to restore that link between your identity, your conscious self, get it back into your brain, to recapture it. Anyway, that was my experience with depersonalization and derealization. It was the worst in the first few months, and it did dissipate over time. And I haven't had an episode You know, I'm now over 2 years off. I haven't had an episode in over a year. What am I saying? I'm not 2 years off. In July, I'll be 2 years off. I haven't had an episode of DPDR in over a year. Yeah, I'm pretty positive about that. But it's different for everyone. You know, people might have different ways of articulating it. It's not going to be the identical experience. The way you may be experiencing it and articulating it may be different. But I think the one thing that you'll find that we have in common about the experience is that we can agree that it's absolutely terrifying. There's no way around that. Put this camera away again.